Hey all, the Roybert here, trying to learn something. All right, there's a couple of items left to discuss about the Pocket. The exposure is going to change if you're changing environments. So you don't want the camera to automatically do changes on its own because the color temperature changes and the brightness changes and all of that. And it looks dumb because it's doing it on the fly. Although it does it slowly, with this camera, it's very gradual, unlike like your FPV cameras, like a Foxier or a Run Cam, where suddenly it's the tone's all blue and then it's flipped back and it's warm tones again, and that drives me insane. And it even bothers me that it does it with an auto setting. The follow feature will probably work for you if you can set it while you're on the ground onto an object. Maybe the object is like a house from far away, if it's something big like that. I don't know if you're going to be able to set it on a drone and then have that drone take off and you follow it, and that's going to be really, really hard to do. However, and your camera's going to quickly lose its focal point, and then it won't know what to look at. So you might end up with the camera looking off in a direction that's not what you intended. And you won't be able to see that from on the ground because you don't have a Wi-Fi connection. The bigger one, the OSMO, does have a Wi-Fi connection. We may be able to control the camera a little bit if we're not flying too far away, if we're like in a yard and and it's only 30 or 40 feet away from me. I might be able to control the gimbal. It's not very likely, particularly since I'm flying. I need somebody else to control the gimbal. It's a two-person job. So I would just set the FPV mode on the camera and let it just stay in one position that it's looking forward, and if you want to follow something, you follow it yourself and let the camera look at whatever you're looking at. To get it in the air, we're certainly not going to just strap it to a battery. So what I had originally been using was a submersible box, because it had mounting points and because it was like a crash box. It would protect the camera entirely. The crash box was helpful. It saved my camera from damage. Of course, I did lose one whole camera because the whole crash box and everything was torn off. But the few times that it took tumbles on the ground, this totally saved my butt, and the gimbal was protected and the camera stayed whole. If you don't want to see the globe, you're going to see the globe if you're flying toward light. You're going to catch glimpses of glints of light and whatever. Your globe needs to stay perfectly clear, and you need to fly away from the sun. This might be a bad idea altogether, though. Up in the air, it might cool it off quite a bit more than just standing here. But if you want to use this on a tripod, I don't recommend it. The camera uses a lot of battery. It goes through a lot of juice. It gets warm. It really gets warm. And this thing is a closed environment. It touches the walls. There's no breathing space. So when it's in here, it's using the water to cool the camera off. I suppose in the air, it could be using the air to cool the camera off. It may work. It's not going to protect your gimbal, however, if you take the globe off. So all you're protecting is the body. At that point, you really just want connection points here or here. All right, so instead, what you need is this thing. This is just a bracket. It holds the camera tightly. It gives you a completely vertical mounting point of threads, and it gives you a diagonal mounting point, which then allows you to. This is how I would probably mount it on the drone in my first go. I'd like to try it this way because this gives you full gimbal. you can turn your pan all the way around if you're standing up. If you're like this, you can only turn so far, and the camera then needs to do a little trickery to stay on its point, because it's doing this. So in order to stay level, it needs to turn down as it goes. Turn down. As the armature is turning up, the camera needs to turn down. It needs to hold several different angles at the same time. It's pretty damn clever stuff, and it does it. It works. But this is all you really need. This costs too much. This is going to break. I know this is going to break, and I'm probably going to damage a camera, but I'm now at the point where this will only work if you're a really good pilot and you don't crash your cameras. That's my goal now, is to work at that level. Okay. Exposure. Let's talk about that for a minute. You can't use auto settings. You've got to get out of that. You have to use custom settings. I'm shooting right now at 1080p, 30 frames per second. I am my shutter speed, I think, is 1/100th of a second, and the ISO is 800. Once you have a good exposure, you have to go into your kelvins. Don't let the camera pick your color temperature, because it will keep changing. Don't use the cloudy, fluorescent, whatever, those settings. Don't use the go into your kelvins and choose. Under fake daylight fluorescent, I'm at about 5,000 kelvins, because it warms it up a little bit without getting weird. Okay, definitely play with that. Most of the time you're in the mid-40s under real light, but sometimes you just plain have to adjust. There's one more point about exposure. The higher you set your exposure, if you want it in 4K or 2.7K, or it's going to shorten how much footage it'll shoot. It'll stop. It just plain stops and restarts immediately. So you can't really. You don't lose anything, but you get a break in your footage. That's probably about 6 minutes in 2.7. I don't know how long it's going to be. I haven't tested it in 4K, but in 2.7K at 48 frames per second, I got 6 minutes and something, and then you have to kind of stitch them together. There's one more element that I wanted to talk about, which is to make this longer, and that is audio. But let's do that in a separate video, because I think this one's gone on long enough.